The night air carried a chill as Deputy Sheriff James Thornton pulled his patrol car into the Sunset gas station. His shift had run longer than expected, and the illuminated sign of the store stood out like a lighthouse against the darkness of the rural highway. His gas gauge hovered just above empty, a reminder that even law enforcement officers couldn't bend the rules of physics. James rubbed his tired eyes and stepped out into the cold. The station was quiet at this hour, just past 11 p.m. on a Tuesday. Only one other car sat parked near the convenience store entrance, a dark sedan with out-of-state plates that James noticed automatically, a habit from his 12 years wearing the badge. The gas pump hummed as James began filling his tank. He stretched his back, feeling the knots that had formed during his long patrol. This particular stretch of highway connected 3 counties and was known as a transit route. Not much happened in their small town, but the highway brought through all types, tourists, truckers, and occasionally, trouble. Movement caught his eye as 2 figures emerged from the sedan and walked toward the store, a man in his 40s, heavy-set with a baseball cap pulled low, and beside him a young girl who couldn't be more than 16. Something about them immediately raised the hairs on James's neck. It wasn't anything obvious, more like the subtle wrongness of a puzzle piece that almost fits. The girl wore jeans and a hoodie that seemed too big for her small frame. Her shoulders were hunched and she kept her gaze fixed on the ground as they walked. The man had his hand on her upper back, guiding her with a grip that seemed just a bit too controlling. James had seen enough in his career to recognize when something wasn't right. He couldn't put his finger on it exactly, but years of training and instinct were sending warning signals to his brain. He finished pumping gas, replaced the nozzle, and decided to head inside the store himself. He needed coffee anyway for the drive home. As he entered, the bell above the door jingled softly. The overnight clerk, an older woman named Betty who'd worked there for as long as James could remember, gave him a tired smile. "Late night, deputy?" she asked, already reaching for a paper cup to fill with coffee. "Just finishing up," James replied with a warm smile, his eyes casually scanning the store. The man and the girl were by the snack aisle. James noticed how the man stayed uncomfortably close to the girl, how his eyes darted around the store constantly. The girl herself seemed to be moving mechanically, reaching for items when the man pointed at them, but otherwise remaining still and quiet. James pretended to browse the small selection of energy drinks while keeping them in his peripheral vision. His training on human trafficking had been updated just 3 months ago, and certain patterns were flashing in his mind like warning lights. The age difference, the controlling behavior, the girl's obvious discomfort, the out-of-state plates. Betty handed James his coffee and he thanked her, moving toward the register. The man and girl were now approaching the counter as well, the man carrying a few snacks and bottled waters. "That'll be $22.50 for the gas and coffee." "Deputy?" Betty said, punching numbers into the old register. As James pulled out his wallet, he positioned himself so he could observe the pair more clearly. The girl stood slightly behind the man, her eyes downcast. But then, for just a split second, she looked up directly at James. In that moment, James felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. Her eyes were wide with a silent desperation he'd seen before in victims, but it was what she did next that made his heart skip a beat. While the man was busy counting cash, the girl subtly raised her hand and made a specific gesture, her thumb tucked into her palm, then folding her fingers down, creating a fist. It was quick, almost imperceptible, but unmistakable to James. The gesture had been featured prominently in their recent training, a signal created by an anti-trafficking organization that had gone viral on social media as a way for victims to silently ask for help. The girl immediately dropped her hand and eyes when the man turned slightly toward her, but the message had been sent, clear as day to someone who knew what to look for. James kept his expression neutral as he paid Betty, his mind racing through protocols and procedures. He couldn't make a move right now, not in the store where a confrontation could put the girl or Betty in danger. He needed to be smart about this. "You folks passing through?" James asked casually as the man stepped up to pay after him. The man stiffened slightly. "Just on our way home," he responded curtly, not meeting James's eyes. "Long drive ahead?" James continued, noting how the girl seemed to shrink further into herself at the sound of the man's voice. "Not too bad," the man replied, clearly uncomfortable with the conversation. "Just a couple hours." James nodded, noticing how the man's accent didn't match the license plate he'd seen outside. Another red flag. Well, drive safe. Roads get tricky this time of night with the deer and all, James said, tipping his hat slightly as he gathered his coffee. He walked outside, his casual demeanor masking the storm of thoughts inside his head. He got into his patrol car but didn't start it immediately. Instead, he pulled out his phone and sent a quick text to dispatch with the license plate number and a brief code that would alert them to a possible trafficking situation. Through the store windows, he could see the man paying for their items, his posture tense. The girl stood behind him, her eyes now fixed on the floor again. James knew he needed to follow them when they left, but he also needed to be careful not to spook them. His phone buzzed with a response from dispatch. Backup available. Plate registered to rental company. Proceed with caution. James started his car but kept the lights off. He positioned it so it wouldn't be immediately visible when the pair exited the store. His heart was pounding now, but his hands were steady. In his career, he'd broken up domestic disputes, chased down armed suspects, and faced numerous dangerous situations. But cases involving young victims always hit differently, stirring something protective and fierce within him. The bell above the store door jingled as the man and girl exited. James watched through his rearview mirror as they returned to the sedan. The man kept looking around the parking lot nervously, but his gaze passed over James's darkened vehicle without lingering. As they pulled out of the gas station, James waited a few seconds before following, maintaining a careful distance. The sedan turned onto the highway heading west, away from town and toward the county line where the road became less traveled and streetlights were few and far between. James stayed back, his headlights dimmed, just close enough to keep their taillights in view. He radioed dispatch with his location and direction of travel. Be advised, I'm following the suspect vehicle westbound on Highway 16. Female juvenile passenger showing signs of distress made the signal requesting help. Vehicle continuing past the Millerville exit. Request backup to coordinate at upcoming intersections. The response came immediately. Copy that, Deputy Thornton. 2 units redirecting to your location. ETA 8 minutes. James continued the careful pursuit, his mind focused but his heart heavy. He thought about the girl's eyes, the silent plea in them, and the courage it must have taken to make that signal with her captor standing right there. Whatever happened tonight, he was determined that her brave action wouldn't be in vain. The sedan maintained speed, showing no signs that the driver had spotted the tail. They passed the abandoned mill, then the turnoff to the lake. The further they drove, the more isolated the surroundings became, and the more certain James felt that his instincts had been correct. Nobody heading home would take this route. It led only to a handful of rundown motels and eventually to a network of back roads that crossed the state line. His radio crackled again. Units in position at Junction 22 and the county line. Awaiting your command. James took a deep breath. The girl's signal kept replaying in his mind, that small fist, that enormous courage. He thought about all the training scenarios, all the procedures, but mostly he thought about getting her to safety. Let's bring her home, he said quietly to himself as he radioed back his response. The night was far from over, and what started as a routine gas stop was about to become anything but ordinary. The dark sedan's taillights glowed red against the night as James kept a careful distance behind. The highway stretched ahead like a black ribbon, bordered by tall pines that seemed to watch silently as the 2 vehicles passed. In his 15 years of law enforcement, James had learned that patience was often more valuable than speed. He switched his radio to low volume as the voice of dispatch came through. Deputy Thornton, backup units are in position. Detective Rivera is coordinating and asks for your assessment. James glanced at his dashboard clock, 11:42 p.m. Tell Rivera I'm maintaining visual on the sedan. Driver shows signs of evasive behavior, taking Route 16 past all main exits. Appears to be checking mirrors frequently. The sedan ahead slowed slightly before taking an unexpected turn onto Lakeview Road, a winding route that locals knew led to nowhere, except a handful of rundown properties, and eventually looped back to the interstate. It was a detour no ordinary traveler would choose, especially at this hour. Subject vehicle turning onto Lakeview. This confirms suspicion. They're testing to see if they're being followed, James reported, easing off his accelerator and allowing more distance to develop between them. He switched off his headlights and continued forward using only his parking lights. thankful for the quarter moon providing just enough illumination to navigate safely. The training scenarios from last month's trafficking intervention course played in his mind. Suspects will often take unnecessary turns or drive erratically to detect surveillance. The radio crackled. Copy that. Units repositioning to Lakeview Junction and Old Mill Road. Rivera suggests you maintain distance but don't lose them. James acknowledged and focused on the difficult task of following without being spotted. The sedan ahead made 2 more turns onto progressively smaller roads, each one leading farther from populated areas. The driver was either hopelessly lost or deliberately heading somewhere remote. His phone vibrated with a text from Rivera. Plate confirms rental from Westlake Airport 3 days ago. Paid cash. Description matches wanted subject in Pearson County case. James felt a knot forming in his stomach. Pearson County had recently issued alerts about a trafficking ring moving young girls across state lines. If this was connected, the situation was even more dangerous than he'd initially thought. The face of the young girl at the gas station flashed in his mind, her silent plea, her frightened eyes. He gripped the steering wheel tighter. After nearly 20 minutes of this cat-and-mouse game through back roads, the sedan finally slowed near a dilapidated 2-story building set back from the road. The faded sign reading Pinewood Motel was barely visible in the darkness. 3 other cars were parked haphazardly in the lot, unusual occupancy for a place that looked like it should have been condemned years ago. James drove past without slowing, turning around at the next bend where he could observe undetected. He watched as the man and girl exited the car and walked toward room number 8. The man's grip on her arm was tight, controlling. The girl's head remained bowed. Subject has stopped at Pinewood Motel on Old Creek Road. They've entered room 8. There are 3 other vehicles on site. Request immediate backup but no sirens, James reported, his voice low and tense. All units responding. ETA 7 minutes. Drone unit also en route for thermal imaging, came the reply. James settled in to observe, his training kicking in as he noted every detail. The motel's layout, the positions of the vehicles. The single dim light illuminating the office where an elderly man sat watching a small television, apparently oblivious to what might be happening under his roof. Movement caught his eye as a heavy-set man emerged from room 12 and walked to room 8, knocking in what appeared to be a pattern. 3 quick taps, pause, then 2 more. The door opened just enough to let him inside before closing quickly. James's suspicions deepened. He reached for his service weapon, checking it before returning it to his holster. Not yet, he told himself. Wait for backup. Do this right. His phone buzzed with another message from Rivera. Thermal imaging shows 4 heat signatures in room 8, 3 in room 12, consistent with possible trafficking operation. Team approaching from north side in unmarked vehicles. The next 7 minutes felt like hours as James continued his surveillance. Another man appeared, this one younger, heading from the parking lot to room 12 with a paper bag in hand. The comings and goings, the secretive manner, the location, everything pointed to organized illegal activity. Finally, James spotted the subtle approach of 2 unmarked police SUVs, their headlights off as they rolled to a stop on either side of the motel lot. Detective Rivera, a seasoned officer known for his methodical approach, stepped out of the first vehicle and made his way to James's position, staying in the shadows. Thornton, Rivera greeted him with a quick nod. Good work following your gut on this one. The girl, what exactly did you see that tipped you off? James described the hand signal, the controlling behavior, the fear in her eyes. She knew what she was doing with that signal. Someone taught her, and she was brave enough to use it. Rivera nodded grimly. We've been tracking this group for months. They move girls through these backwater places, usually just for a night before crossing county or state lines. Based on the thermal imaging and your observations, we believe there may be at least 2 or 3 victims inside. The detective pulled out his phone, showing James a grainy photo. This is Tyler Blackwood, wanted in 3 states for trafficking and exploitation of minors. Is this the man you saw? James studied the image. The same cold eyes, thin lips, and sharp jawline of the man at the gas station. That's him. Rivera tucked the phone away. Then we move now before they relocate. Team 1 will take room 8, Team 2 on room 12. We go in simultaneously. Thornton, I want you with me on room 8 since the girl saw you. Might help keep her calm. The tactical team gathered for a brief huddle, reviewing the approach. Their voices were hushed, movements precise. Each officer checked their gear one final time. Not just weapons, but also blankets, first aid supplies, and water. Experience had taught them that victims often needed immediate care. "Remember," Rivera said, his expression serious, "our primary goal is victim safety. These girls are likely terrified and may not immediately recognize us as help. Soft entry if possible, but be ready if it turns. On my signal in 3 minutes." James felt the familiar rush of adrenaline coupled with focused calm that came before an operation. His thoughts returned to the girl at the gas station, to her courage in making that small signal that had led them here. One gesture, one moment of bravery, had set these events in motion. The teams moved into position with practiced stealth, communicating through hand signals and radio earpieces. James followed Rivera toward room 8, staying close to the wall, careful to avoid the patches of light from the motel's sporadic outdoor lighting. The night had grown colder, and James's breath formed small clouds in the air. Somewhere in the distance an owl called, the sound oddly peaceful against the tension of the moment. From inside room 8, the muffled sound of a television provided cover for their approach. Rivera held up his hand, signaling the team to stop as they reached the door. He pressed his ear against it briefly, then made a series of hand gestures indicating he heard multiple voices inside. The detective pulled back, meeting James's eyes with a silent question. "Ready?" James nodded, positioning himself beside the door, his hand on his weapon but not drawing it yet. Rivera spoke quietly into his radio. "All units in position. Execute on my mark. 3, 2, 1, go." The next moments unfolded with controlled urgency. The door to room 8 burst open as Rivera announced their presence. "Sheriff's Department. Everyone on the ground." While the second team simultaneously entered room 12, James entered behind Rivera, quickly surveying the scene. The man from the gas station, Blackwood, lunged toward a duffel bag on the bed, but a tactical officer tackled him before he could reach it. The heavy-set man who had entered earlier tried to push past James toward the door, but James intercepted him, taking him down with a practiced move. In the corner of the room, 3 young girls huddled together, wide-eyed with fear. James recognized the one from the gas station, her hand gripping another girl's arm protectively. The third girl appeared younger, possibly no more than 14. "It's okay," James said, holstering his weapon and raising his empty hands as he approached them slowly. "I saw your signal at the gas station. You're safe now. We're here to help." Recognition flickered in the gas station girl's eyes, a moment of realization that her desperate signal had worked. Her shoulders shook as the tension began to release. Outside, the night erupted with activity as more patrol cars arrived, their lights flashing but sirens silent. The operation had been executed perfectly. All suspects secured, no injuries, victims found alive. As James helped guide the girls outside, the one from the gas station paused, looking up at him. Her voice was barely audible, rough from what might have been days of silence. "I didn't think anyone would notice," she whispered. James felt a tightness in his chest as he draped a blanket around her shoulders. "You did everything right," he assured her. That signal, it made all the difference. As paramedics approached to examine the girls, James stepped away to help process the scene. Rivera was overseeing the suspects being placed in separate vehicles, evidence being carefully documented and collected. The duffel bag Blackwood went for, Rivera said quietly to James, contained 3 fake IDs, cash, and a loaded handgun. These guys weren't planning on being found. James nodded, watching as the young victims received medical attention, their faces still showing the shock of their ordeal and the sudden, unexpected rescue. The girl from the gas station kept glancing over at him as if making sure he was still there, that this was really happening. "One gesture," James said, almost to himself. "One brave moment at a gas station led us here." Rivera clapped him on the shoulder, "and possibly broke open the case we've been working on for months." Sometimes the smallest actions make the biggest difference. As the night continued to unfold around them, with officers documenting evidence and securing the scene, James knew the journey for these girls was far from over. The road to healing would be long, but tonight, because one girl dared to ask for help and one deputy noticed, that journey could finally begin. The motel parking lot transformed into an organized chaos of flashing lights and hushed, urgent conversations. James stood watching as medical personnel tended to the 3 young girls now seated in the back of an ambulance, blankets wrapped around their shoulders. The gas station girl, whose name they'd learned, was Lily, kept her eyes fixed on James as if afraid he might disappear. "She won't talk to anyone but you," Detective Rivera said, approaching James with a steaming cup of coffee. "The paramedics need to check her over, but she's refusing unless you're there." James accepted the coffee with a nod of thanks. "What about the other girls?" "The younger one's name is Penny. She's 14, reported missing from Westfield County 3 weeks ago. The other girl hasn't shared her name yet, but based on a birthmark, we think she might be Zoe Chen from the Henderson case." James felt a weight in his chest. The Henderson case had made headlines 2 months ago, when a 16-year-old disappeared walking home from a friend's house. Her parents had made emotional pleas on national television, and search parties had combed the area for weeks. "I'll talk to Lily," James said, handing his coffee back to Rivera. "See if I can help her feel safe enough to let the paramedics do their job." As James approached the ambulance, he noticed how Lily straightened, relief washing over her face. The other girls watched him warily, particularly the one they suspected was Zoe, who shifted slightly to place herself between James and Penny in a protective gesture. "Hey there," James said, keeping his voice gentle as he stopped a respectful distance from the ambulance doors. "The paramedics need to make sure you're all okay. Would it help if I stayed nearby while they check you over?" Lily nodded, her hands clutching the blanket tightly. "You're the one from the gas station," she said, her voice scratchy but clearer than before. I didn't know if you understood what I was trying to do." "That hand signal saved all of you," James said simply. "That was incredibly brave." The paramedic, a woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner, caught James's attention. "Deputy, if you could stay right there, I'm going to start with basic vitals. Girls, I'll explain everything I'm doing before I do it, okay?" Over the next 20 minutes, James remained steady and calm as the paramedic checked each girl. They were dehydrated and showed signs of malnutrition. Lily had bruising on her wrists and arms. Penny, the youngest, had a badly treated cut on her leg that the paramedic cleaned and bandaged carefully. The third girl, still silent but allowing the examination, had a sprained ankle that had been left untreated. "They'll all need to go to the hospital," the paramedic told James quietly, "but they're stable for now." A female officer named Deputy Chen approached the ambulance with 3 paper bags. "Thought they might want to change," she said, handing the bags to the paramedic. "We found these clean clothes in their suitcases." James stepped back to give the girls privacy as they changed, using the moment to check in with Rivera. "What are we looking at with the suspects?" James asked. Rivera's expression was grim. "Tyler Blackwood's got a record as long as my arm. The big guy is Vincent Paulson, also known to us. The third guy from room 12 is claiming he was just delivering food, but we found 3 more sets of fake IDs in his car and a notebook with what looks like a transportation schedule. We're bringing in translators to talk with some of the other girls we found." "Other girls?" James hadn't heard about additional victims. Room 12 had 4 more, younger, possibly international. They don't speak much English, but they're in bad shape. Looks like they've been moved around for longer. "Medical team is with them now." James ran a hand over his face, the weight of what they'd uncovered settling heavily on his shoulders. He glanced back toward the ambulance where Lily was now speaking quietly with Deputy Chen. "She's asking for you again," Rivera said, nodding toward the ambulance. "Might be ready to talk." When James returned to the ambulance, he found Lily looking somewhat better in clean clothes, her hair pulled back from her face. She'd accepted a bottle of water and some crackers from the paramedic, though she'd eaten only a few bites. "The detective says you want to talk to me," James said, taking a seat across from her but still giving her plenty of space. Lily nodded, glancing at the other girls before focusing on James. "I need to tell you about the others," she said, her voice stronger now. "There are more of us. Not just here. Take your time," James encouraged her. "Anything you can tell us will help." Lily took a deep breath. "I was taken 3 months ago from a mall parking lot in Riverdale. There was a woman who asked for help with her bags, and then a man, the one from the gas station, grabbed me when I went to help her." Her hands trembled around the water bottle. "They took my phone, my ID, everything. They told me if I tried to run, they'd hurt my little brother. They knew his name, where he went to school." James nodded, letting her set the pace of the conversation while Deputy Chen quietly took notes. "They drove me to 5 different places before this one," Lily continued. "Never stayed anywhere more than 2 nights. Always these sad little motels where nobody asked questions. They picked up Penny next, and She glanced at the quiet girl. Zoe was already with them when I got there. At the sound of her name, the third girl looked up sharply. How do you know my name? She asked, speaking for the first time, her voice a mix of fear and hope. Your parents have been looking for you, James explained gently. Your picture has been on the news. Zoe's eyes filled with tears, but she quickly blinked them away. I didn't think anyone would still be looking after all this time. They never stopped, James assured her. Not for a single day. This seemed to unlock something in Zoe, who straightened her shoulders and turned to Lily. We should tell them everything. About the houses, the other men, the pictures. Lily nodded, drawing strength from Zoe's resolve. They take pictures of us to send to people. They make us dress up and... She trailed off, unable to continue. You don't have to give us details right now, James assured her. Just whatever information might help us find the others. I heard them talking about a farm, Lily said. Somewhere near water because they mentioned a dock. And they said something about moving the new ones there tomorrow night. Penny, who had been silent until now, suddenly spoke up. It's a big white farmhouse with a red door, she said quietly. I saw a picture on his phone. It has a wraparound porch and black shutters. There's a barn behind it painted the same white. James exchanged a glance with Deputy Chen, who was rapidly typing these details into her phone. That's really helpful, Penny, James said. Do you remember anything else about it? Any landmarks or street names? Penny shook her head. But I heard them say it was a 2-hour drive from here, and they had to cross a big bridge to get there. This narrowed it down considerably. There was only one major bridge within that driving distance, the one spanning Lakewood Reservoir. Rivera was already on his radio, relaying the information to the command center. You're all being incredibly brave, James told the girls. The information you're giving us could help save the others. Will we have to see them again? Lily asked, fear creeping back into her voice. The men who took us? No, James said firmly. They're in custody and they're going to stay there. You won't have to face them unless you choose to at trial, and even then, there are ways to make that easier. The paramedic approached again. We need to transport them to the hospital now, she said. The doctors are waiting. James nodded and stood. I'll be following right behind your ambulance, he assured the girls. And there will be officers at the hospital the entire time you're there. You're safe now. As they prepared to leave, Lily reached out and caught James's sleeve. I learned that hand signal from a video, she said. My health teacher showed our class last year. I never thought I'd actually use it. James felt a surge of gratitude for that unknown teacher who had armed Lily with such crucial knowledge. Well, I'm glad you remembered it when it mattered. Me too, Lily said, managing a small but genuine smile, the first James had seen from her. As the ambulance doors closed and the vehicle pulled away, James felt a tap on his shoulder. Rivera stood there, phone in hand. We've got something, the detective said, his eyes bright with purpose. State police think they've identified the farmhouse based on the girl's description. It's a property registered to a shell company that we've linked to Blackwood's associate. They're setting up surveillance now. How soon can we move? James asked, already walking toward his cruiser. Teams are mobilizing. We're coordinating with 3 counties and the FBI's trafficking task force, Rivera replied, matching James's pace. If we're right about the timing, we might be able to intercept the next transport and catch them off guard. James checked his watch, 3:17 a.m. The night that had started with a routine gas stop had become one of the most significant operations of his career. I want to be there, he said. These girls trusted me. I want to make sure we find the others. Rivera nodded. Wouldn't have it any other way. We roll in 20 minutes. Get some coffee and gear up. As James prepared to join the larger operation, he thought about the small, brave gesture Lily had made at the gas station, a simple hand signal that had set all of this in motion. One person noticing, one victim brave enough to reach out, one moment that changed everything. In the distance, the ambulance's lights flashed as it carried the girls toward medical care and the beginning of a long recovery. James watched until it turned the corner, then headed to his cruiser with renewed determination. The night wasn't over yet, and somewhere other victims were waiting to be found. Dawn broke over the rolling countryside, painting the sky in soft pinks and golds that belied the tension of the moment. James crouched behind a patrol vehicle, one of 20 law enforcement officers surrounding the white farmhouse with its distinctive red door. Just as Penny had described, black shutters framed the windows, and a large barn stood behind the main house, its weathered paint gleaming in the early morning light. "All units in position," came the quiet confirmation through James's earpiece. "Thermal imaging confirms 8 heat signatures inside the house, 5 in the main living area, 2 upstairs, 1 in what appears to be a basement." The FBI tactical commander, Agent Wilson, gave James and the other officers a final briefing. "Based on intelligence from our rescued victims and surveillance overnight, we believe this is a central hub for the trafficking network. Our primary objective is victim safety. Secondary is securing evidence. Remember, these victims may not immediately recognize us as help. Approach with caution and compassion." James checked his vest and equipment one last time. After dropping the girls at the hospital, he'd had just enough time to join the briefing at the county line before the convoy of unmarked vehicles made its way to the farmhouse property. The location was isolated, the nearest neighbor over 2 miles away, and surrounded by fields that had long gone fallow. "Team Alpha takes the front," Agent Wilson continued. "Team Bravo covers the rear exits and barn. Team Charlie secures the perimeter and any vehicles on site. Deputy Thornton, you're with me on Alpha. On my signal, we move." The property appeared peaceful in the morning light, with dew glistening on the overgrown grass. A battered pickup truck and a dark SUV with tinted windows sat in the gravel driveway. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney despite the mild spring morning. Agent Wilson raised his hand, then dropped it sharply. "Execute now." The teams moved with practiced precision, converging on the farmhouse from all directions. James followed close behind Wilson as they approached the front porch, weapons ready but not raised. "FBI, search warrant," Wilson announced through a handheld speaker as they reached the door. "Open up." For 3 heartbeats, nothing happened. Then came the sounds of scrambling from inside. Panicked voices, running footsteps, something heavy falling. Wilson nodded to the entry team, who immediately breached the door with a battering ram. James entered behind the tactical officers, the familiar rush of adrenaline sharpening his senses. The scene inside unfolded in fragments of chaos, a heavy-set man lunging for what looked like a shotgun propped by the fireplace, a woman in a bathrobe screaming as she fled toward the kitchen, a younger man halfway down the stairs, frozen in shock. "Hands where I can see them." Down on the ground. The commands echoed through the house as officers secured the suspects. James followed Wilson toward the back of the house where the thermal imaging had shown the most heat signatures. They passed through a cluttered kitchen and down a narrow hallway, where a door stood slightly ajar. "This way," Wilson said quietly. Approaching the door with caution, he pushed it open slowly to reveal a set of stairs leading down to a basement. The room below was dimly lit and smelled of mildew and fear. As they descended, James's heart sank at what they found. 5 young women, none appearing older than 20, huddled together on bare mattresses laid across the concrete floor. Their wide eyes reflected terror as the officers entered. "We're here to help," James said, holstering his weapon and showing his empty hands. "You're safe now." One of the women, with long brown hair and a bruised cheek, stepped slightly forward. "Are you really police?" she asked in accented English, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," James replied, slowly reaching for his badge to show her. "We're here to take you somewhere safe." The woman translated this to the others in a language James didn't recognize. The relief on their faces was palpable, though mixed with lingering fear and disbelief. Upstairs, the sounds of the operation continued, officers calling clear as they secured each room. The suspects being read their rights, evidence being documented. James stayed with the women as female officers and paramedics arrived to help them. "Can you tell me your name?" James asked the woman who had spoken. "Anna," she replied. "We've been here for 10 days. Before that, another house, then another. They keep moving us." "You're not going to be moved anymore," James assured her. "Not unless it's to take you home." As the women were guided upstairs and outside to waiting ambulances, James rejoined Wilson in what appeared to be a home office. The FBI agent was examining a laptop, while another officer photographed documents spread across a desk. "They weren't just moving people," Wilson said grimly, turning the screen so James could see. "They were keeping records, dates, locations, merchandise as they called them. This operation spans at least 5 states. James felt a surge of anger at the clinical way the traffickers had documented their crimes. "How big is this network?" "Bigger than we thought," Wilson replied, scrolling through files. "There are at least 3 more properties listed here, along with names of clients and middlemen. And this," he pointed to a spreadsheet, "appears to be financial records. Hundreds of thousands of dollars changing hands." Outside, James found Detective Rivera overseeing the collection of evidence from the vehicles. "The SUV was reported stolen from a rental company 2 months ago," Rivera said. "False plates, of course. And look what we found in the trunk." He opened the trunk to reveal a stack of suitcases, each containing clothing, toiletries, and most disturbingly, multiple sets of fake identification documents. "They were preparing to move them again," James said, examining a passport with the photo of a young woman but clearly falsified information. "Tonight, just like Lily said. And we've got the transport schedule," Rivera added, holding up a sealed evidence bag containing a notebook. "Names, dates, drop-off points. This is going to help us track down others involved." Throughout the morning, the investigation continued to unfold. The property was thoroughly searched, revealing hidden compartments in the barn containing more documentation, burner phones, and cash. 3 more suspects arrived at the property while the operation was ongoing and were immediately taken into custody. By midday, James returned to the hospital to check on Lily, Penny, and Zoe. He found them in a secure wing, where they'd been placed in adjoining rooms under the watchful eye of Deputy Chen and another officer. "How are they doing?" James asked the attending physician, a woman with tired eyes and a determined expression. "Physically, they'll recover with time," she said. "Dehydration, malnutrition, some minor injuries. We're running tests for other health concerns. Emotionally," she trailed off, shaking her head, "that's going to take longer. But they've been assigned advocates and counselors who specialize in trauma recovery." James nodded, unsurprised. "Can I speak with them?" "Briefly," the doctor said. "They've been asking for updates about the farmhouse operation. I think it would help them to hear from you." James found the girls sitting together in Lily's room. They looked different already. Cleaner, calmer, though the shadows under their eyes spoke of sleepless nights and lingering fear. Penny was curled up in an armchair, half asleep, while Zoe and Lily sat on the bed talking quietly. They fell silent when James entered, all 3 watching him expectantly. "You were right about the farmhouse," he told them, taking a seat by the door. "We found 5 more women there this morning. They're safe now, too." Lily's eyes filled with tears. Was Anna there?" "She was with me before they separated us." "Yes, Anna was there," James confirmed, remembering the brave young woman who had first spoken to him in the basement. "She helped translate for the others. She asked about you, too." Relief washed over Lily's face. "And did you find the records?" "The men were always typing on laptops, taking pictures. We found everything," James assured her. "Computers, phones, documents. It's all evidence now, and it's going to help us find everyone involved in this network and shut it down for good." Zoe, who had been quiet until now, looked up with determined eyes. "Have you called our families yet?" "Your parents are on their way," James said gently. "All of them. They've been notified that you're safe." This news seemed to hit the girls differently. Penny burst into tears while Zoe simply nodded, as if confirming something she'd been hoping for but afraid to believe. Lily stared down at her hands. "What about the others?" she asked. "The ones from countries far away? They can't go home, can they?" James was struck by her concern for others despite her own trauma. "There are organizations that specialize in helping people in their situation. They won't be abandoned." A nurse appeared at the door, signaling that James's time was up. As he rose to leave, Lily called after him. "Deputy Thornton, will you be there? When our families come?" James nodded without hesitation. "If you want me to be, yes." "I do," she said simply. "You saw my signal when nobody else did. You believed me." Outside in the hallway, James found Rivera waiting with a cup of coffee and a tired smile. "Computer forensics has already cracked the password on one of the laptops," the detective said. "They found connections to 3 similar operations in neighboring states. FBI is coordinating raids as we speak." James accepted the coffee gratefully. "This is bigger than we imagined." "And it all started because you noticed a hand signal at a gas station," Rivera reminded him. "Small moments, big consequences." As they walked toward the elevator, James's phone buzzed with a message from Agent Wilson. Second property secured. 4 more victims rescued. Call me when you can. James pocketed his phone, a mix of emotions washing over him. Satisfaction at the progress, sorrow for what the victims had endured, determination to see the case through to the end. You know, Rivera said as they stepped into the elevator, in all my years of law enforcement, I've never seen a case break open quite like this. One observant deputy, one brave girl, one moment at a gas station that most people would have missed entirely. James thought about Lily's words. You saw my signal when nobody else did, and felt the weight of both responsibility and hope. The elevator doors closed, carrying them back to the ongoing investigation, to the work that remained to be done, to the network still being unraveled thread by thread. 6 months had passed since that fateful night at the gas station. The courthouse steps gleamed in the autumn sunlight as James adjusted his tie and checked his watch. The trial of Tyler Blackwood and his associates was entering its final phase, and today was perhaps the most important day of the proceedings. Lily would be taking the stand. James had kept his promise to be there for the girls when their families arrived at the hospital. He'd witnessed tearful reunions, the kind that stay with a person forever. Penny's parents had fallen to their knees when they saw her. Zoe's father had been so overcome he could barely speak, while her mother hadn't let go of her daughter's hand for hours. Lily's reunion had been quieter but no less powerful, her grandmother holding her close, whispering words of comfort, her younger brother beaming through tears. In the months that followed, James had stayed connected with all 3 girls as they began the long process of healing. Today, as he entered the courthouse, he spotted Lily sitting on a bench in the hallway, her grandmother beside her. At 16, Lily looked different now, healthier, with clear eyes and a steadier gaze. She still carried the weight of her experience, but there was strength in her posture that hadn't been there before. Deputy Thornton, she greeted him with a small smile when she saw him. Right on time, as always. Wouldn't miss it, James replied, shaking hands with her grandmother. How are you feeling about today? Lily took a deep breath. Nervous, but ready. You've prepared well, her grandmother assured her, and you're not alone in there. The prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman named Ms. Winters, approached them with a folder tucked under her arm. Lily, we have about 20 minutes before they call you. Do you have any last questions? Will I have to look at him? Lily asked, the concern clear in her voice. You can keep your eyes on me or on the jury, Ms. Winters said gently. And remember, he can't hurt you anymore. Inside the courtroom, James took his seat in the row behind Lily and her grandmother. The room was packed with journalists, law enforcement officers, and members of the public who had been following the case. In the 6 months since the initial arrests, the investigation had expanded dramatically, uncovering a trafficking network that spanned 7 states and had victimized dozens of young women and girls. The evidence gathered from the farmhouse computers had been damning. Financial records, transportation schedules, even communications with buyers. The technical team had traced digital breadcrumbs that connected Blackwood to 3 other trafficking rings, leading to more arrests and more rescues. When Lily was called to the stand, a hush fell over the courtroom. She walked forward with measured steps, took the oath, and seated herself. From where James sat, he could see her hands trembling slightly, but her voice remained steady as she stated her name for the record. Lily, Ms. Winters began, can you tell the court how you first came into contact with the defendant, Tyler Blackwood? For the next hour, Lily recounted her ordeal, the abduction from the mall parking lot, the threats against her family, the constant movement from location to location. She described the conditions they'd endured, the fear that had become their constant companion, and the moment at the gas station when she'd seen James in his uniform and made the split-second decision to signal for help. I didn't know if he would recognize it, Lily said, glancing briefly at James. It was something my health teacher had shown our class in a safety video. I'd practiced it a few times back then, but never thought I'd actually need to use it. And when did you make this hand signal? Ms. Winters asked. When the man who took me was distracted at the cash register. I caught the deputy's eye and made the signal with my hand, thumb tucked into my palm, fingers folded over it. It only took a second, and what happened after that? The deputy followed us. He brought help. He saved us. Lily's voice cracked slightly, but she steadied herself. If he hadn't noticed, if he hadn't known what that signal meant. She didn't need to finish the thought. Everyone in the courtroom understood the implications. When it came time for cross-examination, the defense attorney approached cautiously. He seemed to recognize that aggressive questioning of Lily would only harm his client's already damaged case. "Ms. Lily," he began, "you testified that you were moved frequently from location to location. Is it possible that my client was merely a driver, rather than an organizer of these activities?" Lily's eyes flashed. "No, he gave orders to the others. He made phone calls about deliveries and merchandise. He collected money. He threatened us and told us what would happen if we tried to run or signal for help." She took a steadying breath. He knew exactly what he was doing. By the time Lily stepped down from the witness stand, there wasn't a person in the courtroom unmoved by her testimony. The defense attorney looked grim, while Ms. Winters gave Lily a small nod of approval as she returned to her seat. Outside the courthouse during the lunch recess, James found Lily and her grandmother sitting on a bench under an old oak tree, away from the reporters who had gathered on the steps. "You did incredibly well in there," James told her, taking a seat beside them. "Your testimony was clear and powerful." "I just told the truth," Lily said simply. "How are the others doing?" "Have you heard from them?" James nodded. "Penny's back in school. Her parents said to tell you she joined the debate team, if you can believe it. Zoe is still working with her therapist, but she started volunteering at an animal shelter, which seems to be helping." "And Anna? The others from the farmhouse?" "Making progress," James assured her. "The international victims are working with immigration attorneys. 2 have received special visas to stay here, and 1 has been reunited with her family back home." Lily nodded, absorbing this information. It helps to know they're okay, that something good came from everything that happened. Her grandmother patted her hand. "More than something good. You know, the hand signal you used has been taught to thousands more students since your story came out. That safety program has expanded to schools in 3 more states." This was true. While Lily's identity had been protected in the media as a minor, her story, and specifically the hand signal that had saved her, had received national attention. The signal itself was now being taught in schools, community centers, and online safety programs across the country. "Detective Rivera asked me to give you this," James said, pulling a small envelope from his pocket. "He couldn't be here today because he's testifying in the federal case, but he wanted you to have it." Lily opened the envelope to find a newspaper clipping. It was a small article about a 12-year-old girl in Michigan who had used the hand signal to alert a librarian that the man she was with wasn't her uncle as he claimed, but someone who had lured her away from a bus stop. "Because of you," James said quietly. "She's home with her family tonight." Lily's eyes filled with tears, but they were different from the tears of fear and trauma James had witnessed months ago. These were tears of something stronger, perhaps purpose, perhaps healing. "I've been thinking about what I want to do," she said after a moment, carefully folding the clipping and returning it to the envelope. "When I finish school, I think maybe I want to become an advocate, to help other kids who've been through what I went through." Her grandmother smiled. "You'd be wonderful at that." The courthouse bell rang, signaling the end of the recess. As they stood to return inside, Lily turned to James. "Will you be there for the verdict?" "I will," he promised. 3 days later, the jury returned their decision after just 4 hours of deliberation. Guilty on all counts. Blackwood and his associates received sentences ranging from 20 years to life without parole. The successful prosecution paved the way for the federal cases still penned